That they've gone back to the Middle East, and it's clear now that they've also come to the United States.
People like Ahmed Rassam, the man charged with attempting to bomb the United States over the millennium. He's a member of Algeria's armed Islamic group, but was trained by bin Laden. So were members of Pakistan's Harak-ul-Mujahideen group, which hijacked an Indian jetliner to Afghanistan in December 1999. On Friday, Pakistan's president informed the U.S. his country is prepared to take specific steps to help the U.S. wage its campaign against bin Laden. And in the Arab world, Powell has asked countries like Saudi Arabia to cut off the flow of money and resources to bin Laden. For Secretary Powell, who led Allied troops to victory in the Gulf War, this war against terrorists will be fought on an entirely different battlefield.
And so you have to design a campaign plan that goes after that kind of enemy. And it isn't always blunt force military, although that is certainly an option.
But diplomatic sources say whatever option the U.S. chooses to take, it will need the support of Islamic countries. Such support would send a strong message to bin Laden and his Islamic extremist supporters around the world. They have nowhere to hide. Andrea Koppel, CNN, at the State Department.
Well, the U.S. request for support from Pakistan has left that country's president caught in the middle. Tom Mintier is in Islamabad and tells us that if Pakistan doesn't cooperate, it runs the risk of angering the Western world. But if it does help, it's going to face problems at home.
Inside the mosques of the Pakistani city of Islamabad on this Friday, day of prayer. Special prayers were said for the Americans killed by the terrorist attacks on the United States. A few miles away at the president's house, the government of Pakistan was also looking for guidance. The U.S. has presented not only a new ambassador to Pakistan, but at the same time a wish list if military action is launched against Afghanistan. Senior U.S. administration officials tell CNN that Pakistani leaders were asked to close the border with Afghanistan, stop buying fuel for the Taliban, and provide intelligence on Osama bin Laden. At this meeting of Pakistan's top military leaders, the only item on the agenda was how to assist the United States. The decision to help America goes against long-standing ties to the Taliban and assistance by some in the Pakistani military to bin Laden's cause. The help for the United States could carry political risk at home.
The consequences of it could be disastrous for Pakistan. And if there are American interests in Pakistan in the long run, then those interests will also suffer.
Many in Pakistan have supported Osama bin Laden's efforts in the past. Now some political analysts are saying the Taliban needs to oust bin Laden before it's too late.
Unless the Taliban are willing to be bombed back to the Stone Age and cease to exist as an entity, I think it is in the larger interest to get rid of Osama bin Laden, who has become a strategic liability for them.
The United States has made it clear to Pakistan that it is either with America or against America. Publicly, it has announced support, but what is certainly not clear at this point is how extensive that support will be. Tom Mintier, CNN, Islamabad, Pakistan.
Well, the leader of Afghanistan's ruling Taliban addressed his country about possible attacks. In a national radio address, the Taliban's supreme leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, told citizens not to be afraid, but to prepare for a holy war. He said the attack would not be because of suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden, but called it a demonization of Islam. The Taliban have said that bin Laden could not have been involved in these attacks. Meanwhile, many residents and international aid workers have already fled the capital city of Kabul. Jim?
If you're just joining our coverage of America's new war, we want to bring you up to date on the latest developments now. Against the backdrop of billowing smoke, rescuers are once again digging through the pile of destruction in New York City. It has been nearly 4 days since the attacks, and rescue operations have been ongoing ever since. No survivors were found in the last 2 days. Rescuers say they are still hopeful. Meantime, search crews in Pennsylvania recovered the voice data recorder from the hijacked United Airlines flight. Authorities are hoping it will reveal details about the plane's crash on Tuesday. Voice recorders on both planes that struck the World Trade Center are still missing. Now, authorities have made their first arrest in direct connection to the attacks. The Justice Department says the man is a material witness in the case. He was one of the people who was detained Thursday at JFK International Airport in New York. Thus far in the investigation, 35 search warrants and hundreds of subpoenas have already been issued.
You know, we saw those moving pictures earlier from the national, the prayer ceremony at the National Cathedral in Washington, a candlelight vigil going on the west coast of this country right now. But, you know, many countries around the world join the American people in a day of mourning. And for more on this, let's join Jane Dutton in London. Jane?
Thanks, Colleen. And indeed, there were vigils around the world Friday. Canada offered its prayers to the victims and its support to all Americans. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien said his country's friendship with the United States has no limit.
We're here today to honor the memory of those who lost their lives on Tuesday with the national anthems.
3 minutes of silence in memory of those who died. Britain and the rest of Europe came to a standstill in the middle of the day. Millions stood in silence, united in their support and sympathy for America. In Germany, thousands gathered for a ceremony of remembrance. Afterwards, there was a march for peace in the streets of Berlin. And in Iran, an unprecedented show of sympathy. The national soccer team and 60,000 spectators observed a minute of silence at the Tehran soccer stadium before a World Cup qualifying game. Iran has strongly condemned the attacks against the US. After 2 decades of enmity between the two countries, that's a gesture Washington is welcoming. The mood was also somber at NATO's headquarters in Brussels. There, too, it was a day of mourning, but also of hard reflection. The alliance's position is clear. The attacks were an assault against all of its members, but some may not be willing to join the US on the battlefield. Diana Muriel reports.
A time for respect and remembrance. The 19 ambassadors to NATO shoulder to shoulder, observing 3 minutes of silence at midday on Friday, along with millions of other Europeans. They stand in readiness following Wednesday's affirmation of Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, the first time a commitment has been given to a collective defence against an attack on an alliance member. Quite what that commitment will involve is less clear. Some alliance members, like Britain, have promised strong support for any NATO effort. Even Norway, reported to be less enthusiastic, says its commitment is firm.
Our resources are more limited, of course, than the United States resources, but we will certainly put military resources at the disposal of any operation that the alliance would decide. There should be no doubt about that. Special forces or whatever we could bring to bear on the situation.
The British and the French could also provide elite troops to any operation if required. But support from others, like the Netherlands, appears more muted.
We will be with you, mentally, morally, and possibly also in concrete terms. But what it will be at that stage, I can't answer today.
Former NATO chief Willy Klaus believes some members of the NATO alliance would be unwilling to participate in direct military action, particularly if that involved attacks on countries that are shown to have harboured or supported the terrorists responsible for Tuesday's acts of terror.
It depends what countries and what could be the consequences of the military actions against those countries. Are we speaking about countries controlling nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, yes or no? It's a big difference, you know.
Until a terrorist target is identified, NATO allies are understood to be providing military intelligence to assist the United States in their investigation. As the 19 national flags of the NATO alliance fly at half-staff, the time for action could be approaching. The United States has yet to make specific demands for NATO assistance, but that is expected here in the coming days and weeks. Diana Muriel, CNN, at NATO headquarters in Brussels.
That's it from me, Jane Dutton in London. For now, back to you, Jim in Atlanta.
All right, Jane, thanks for that. Well, Tuesday's attacks have led 3 of America's largest companies to issue profit warnings now. General Electric says its insurance business expects claims of some $600 million as a result of the attacks. And then another insurance company, MetLife, says it stands to lose between $250 and $300 million. However, it says it will do everything possible to pay claims promptly. And car maker Ford reports that it will cut third-quarter production by some 110,000 vehicles. That is because transport problems have held up the delivery of needed components.
Well, the New York Stock Exchange is scheduled to reopen Monday after 4 days without the familiar opening bell and these days the ups and downs of the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ. Greg Clarkin reports on what's being done to ensure an orderly resumption of trading.
They washed away the dirt and the grime, hoping to cleanse Wall Street of the remnants of the attacks on the World Trade Center. But inside the New York Stock Exchange, the challenges to restoring trading ran deeper. There are monumental telecommunications obstacles, including making sure electric and phone service will be intact. And then there is the main issue, making sure the sophisticated network that handles the trades for the NYSE can be processed.
The challenge is recreating the network, the interconnected infrastructure that brings 85 million investors individually and another 10,000 institutions from all over the world.
The New York Board of Trade was located in the World Trade Center complex. It will have a new facility come Monday.
Well, the major issue is we have to make sure that all of our clearing members are able to receive the trades and to clear them. It's one thing to trade, but if you don't match them and clear them, you've got a serious problem.
All of the trading exchanges will be undergoing extensive testing this weekend to spot potential problems.
I mean, we've got to make sure we have adequate power, we have adequate access to downtown, and that we have the telecommunications capability necessary to carry all of this.
The NYSE and other exchanges will be working through the weekend, testing and retesting computer and telecommunication systems, all in an effort to make sure Monday morning's trading goes smoothly. Greg Clarkin, CNN Financial News, New York.
Now, the international financial community is waiting with some trepidation, we should say, for Monday's opening bell on Wall Street. Robert Miller is an associate editor at Sunday Business. That's a British financial magazine. He's joining us now from London. Thanks so much. And I want to begin just by asking you the bottom line. Are we worried about the technical end of it or the psychological end?
It's a bit of both, I think, Jim. Good morning from here. I think that, first of all, it would be wrong to assume that it will be anything like a full trading session. Many of the people with their disaster recovery, as we've heard earlier on your reports, it's operating perhaps on a quarter strength. So there will be some nervousness. There's definitely, will the system hold up? And certainly the regulators from this end, the equivalent of your SEC, the Financial Services Authority and the Bank of England are standing by if necessary to help out. The psychological, of course, no one can tell except that it will be absolutely huge. And in many ways, it's perhaps a symbolic opening rather than expecting huge volumes from this end anyway.
All right, when we look at the situation that's facing the market here, we have to also look at the way that people expect things to go. Now, we watched the dips in Europe and Asia after this disaster. The U.S. markets have been closed, and they actually do provide quite a bit of leadership, don't they?
I think perhaps if anything has been borne home in market terms since Tuesday's awful events, it is that the world markets certainly do still take their lead from Wall Street. We all need Wall Street, if you like, as a totem pole as to what's happening. Obviously, individual markets will react to individual events, but clearly Wall Street, or perhaps what I'm talking collectively about all the different exchanges in America, are very much the leaders. We do take our lead. And obviously, as you say, they've been closed.
Does this terrorist attack risking pushing the U.S. economy into a full-fledged recession and thereby risking the wider global economy?
I think the likelihood, it was there before. I think American consumers realized that before perhaps the Michigan Confidence Index, which showed an 8-time low in consumer confidence. And what we perhaps forget in all this is that the American economy, large though it is roughly 2/3 consumer spending. The consumers, certainly from our point of view over here and in other world markets, consumers have been the spenders of last resort. We're now asking them to sort of gird up their loins after this, to go at it again. I think that's possibly a very tall order, and I would suspect anyway for perhaps this quarter and the next quarter that the American economy will skate into recession. How it comes out of that and how quickly, I think, will depend perhaps on the earnings season coming up. The companies traditionally in America, as you know, look at their forward investment plans around about this time of year. They've been down recently in the last couple of years.
just because of the politics involved, the prestige involved, do you think that the federal government, the Fed, is going to act more quickly, perhaps cutting rates by a full 50 points?
Certainly that is the rumour over here, that either at 8:30, 9 o'clock Monday morning New York time, or perhaps during the week, and perhaps a symbolic before the opening is saying, here's a cut. Whether that will be concerted across the other major, the European Central Bank and the Bank of England, I think remains to be seen. But if things did look like they needed a helping hand, I'm sure that is a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out.
Robert Miller, our thanks to you, and good day to you there in London. Colleen?
Well, the whole world will be watching New York's Open on Monday, that's for sure. But let's return you now to New York and the man who's keeping his own nightly vigil over the scene for us, for you. That's our Garrick Utley. Garrick?
Yes, thank you, Colleen. One little item, perhaps it doesn't loom that large compared to all the other things that have happened this week in New York City, but an indication about the level of anxiety and where this anxiety comes from. It's reported now that among those who feel most vulnerable about going to their place of work are those New Yorkers who work in the Empire State Building. Why? Well, perhaps you'd understand this from common logic. It is now the largest standing, the tallest building in Manhattan, once that the World Trade Center is no longer there. Perhaps a certain perverse, pessimistic logic at work there. Let's go down now to Gary Tuchman, who is in Lower Manhattan, and he's going to bring us up to date on what's happening close to where the disaster occurred. Gary.
Garrick, you just brought up a sad but very interesting point. For 28 years, the World Trade Center has been the largest building in New York City. As a matter of fact, for a short time, it was the tallest building in the world. And the Sears Tower in Chicago was built. It became the second tallest building in the world. So New Yorkers have known this to be the tallest building in New York City for so many years. The Empire State Building, which used to be the tallest building in the world, used to be the tallest building in New York City, obviously, is once again the tallest building in New York City because of this diabolical reason. Now, it's been exactly 90 hours since all hell broke loose here in Lower Manhattan. This is where the World Trade Center used to stand. Now, fire continues to burn, smoke continues to rise, and workers continue to be on the scene trying to find survivors. But the search is not really bearing fruit. Not one survivor has been found over the last 2 days. Terribly disappointing to the rescue workers who are on the scene, and totally heartbreaking to the family members who are waiting for any news whatsoever. 4,700 people are still missing. We come to you right now from Greenwich Street, and this street is only open to emergency workers, so all through the evening and all through these early morning hours, cars have been coming down, fire trucks, ambulances, sanitation trucks, everyone participating in this search. This area is a ghost town, totally closed to the public. There isn't even electricity in many of these buildings right now. It's just open to the emergency workers and to members of the news media like us. Once again, it was 90 hours ago that terrorists commandeered two planes. One hit number 1 World Trade Center, the other one hit number 2 World Trade Center. Number 1 World Trade Center, by the way, the first one hit was the same World Trade Center tower that was bombed back in 1993. Testimony came out during that trial of the bombers of the World Trade Center that they wanted to knock down the entire building. And sadly and tragically, that's what happened this time. We want to talk about one other thing before we go back to you, Garrick. The workers who are on the scene, there's between 1,000 and 2,000 at all times. It is a very dangerous job. And the reason we can directly tell you it's so dangerous is because during the Oklahoma City bombing, one of the emergency workers who went in there was Rebecca Anderson. She was a nurse, and she was hit in the head by a chunk of steel while she was in the building. She later died in the hospital. She is one of the 168 victims of the Oklahoma City bombing. Garrick, back to you.
Gary, one quick question here, something I think may be baffling some of our viewers. We saw a shot just a moment ago that the smoke is still rising there over the site of the attack last Tuesday. Several days later there, how is it possible these fires are still burning? Where are they? Are they so hidden that the fire department can't get to them, or are they simply not that important and they're being ignored? There we see the smoke.
Garrick, there is just so much rubble. I mean, keep in mind, the Mayor Giuliani said today that over 10,000 tons, which is 20 million pounds of rubble, has been taken away. But it's barely making a dent. The pile, the rubble, looks almost exactly the same as it did a few days ago, and that gives you an idea of how much rubble is there. So the rubble it's 75 feet high at points. it is so deep and so wide that fires just break out in all different areas, and it's a lot of work to try to put them out, and once they put them out, another one sprouts up, and that's what happens. There are constantly fires, and that's creating all the smoke behind me that hasn't gone away in the 90 hours since this tragedy occurred.
Thank you very much, Gary Tuckman, on the scene there. Now back to Colleen in Atlanta.
All right, Garrick, thanks very much. Over to Jim.
Well, all across the United States, Colleen, flags popping up everywhere. You can see them in cars, you can see them outside homes. They're prominently displayed as a show of support for the victims and a sign of unity among Americans. Professional athletes also doing their part. Major League Baseball busy adding flags to the sides of baseball caps. They'll be worn by all players on Monday when the games will be played for the first time since the attack. Well, from Miami to Minnesota, from Burbank to Boston, the people of the United States have been lighting candles to remember those who perished. Let's take a glimpse at just a few of those vigils.
God bless America.
I think this is just one sign of the unity and the solidarity. And it's nice to know that what you feel, the pain and the hurt, is shared by a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are trying to make some good out of this. So I think it's important to share that with everybody.
Young and old and people of all persuasions, and it's fantastic to see that we all have one thing in common, that we love this country.
Really horrible, this whole situation. I think it was a big shock to everyone, and I think everyone was stunned at first, and I think we're all doing the best we can.
I think it's absolutely amazing that the government is taking such a unified stance towards all of this. I mean, to see Mayor Giuliani, Hillary Clinton, and Governor Pataki all standing side by side in unity, I truly feel that they and President Bush are giving this city a strength that it has never seen before.
It has been an anxious time, though, for many Arab Americans and Muslims in the United States, many of them adding their voices to the national chorus. Muslims have been gathering in mosques and community centers, offering prayers and raising money for victims as well. But some people, including many Afghans, worry about becoming targets for Americans' anger. CNN's Rusty Dornan has that story now from California.
Arif Armaz sold every American flag in his store in Fremont, California, a source of pride for him right now. Armaz fled Afghanistan when the Soviets invaded. He believes his native land is being unjustly blamed for terrorism the U.S. increasingly believes was the work of a man from Saudi Arabia.
No, I don't believe it is Afghani people. It's just this tourism, Osama bin Laden.
Others came here when the Taliban regime took over. Some say the world turned its back on Afghanistan when that happened, and that isolation allowed the regime to harbor Osama bin Laden.
This terrorist group that is terrorizing the world has been torturing and victimizing, massacring our people in Afghanistan. We have asked numerous times for international help, and we got none.
Mohammed Kamosh worries that Afghanis here will be blamed for the Taliban's actions. The day of the attacks, someone threw a rock at his storefront.
Maybe something happened to us, something like my kids, they go to school, they are under stress. People look at them, yeah, he's Afghan, you guys are doing that.
Friday, a holy day for Muslims. This Friday, a feeling of vulnerability. Outside the only Afghan mosque is extra security and local police patrols. While the threats have been relatively minor, there is uncertainty and unease among the Afghan community. Afghani businesses line the streets in downtown Fremont. Many here say those left in Afghanistan are for the most part the poor, brutalized by the war with the Soviets and now the repressive policies of the Taliban. Afghans here fear the talk of war.
The innocent people get killed. They should do something. They should talk with the Taliban to get that guy, you know. They shouldn't kill these people, the innocent people.
People here worry that revenge for Tuesday's attack may mean an all-out strike against a nation they feel has suffered enough. Rusty Dornan, CNN, Fremont, California.
It has been said many times in the last few days that New York is the city that never sleeps, but these days it may be truer than ever. People have been glued to their television screens all day and all night. Our Jeannie Mose has more.
If you're watching this story, you may already be hooked, horrified, yet mesmerized by planes aimed at buildings. Buildings that collapse before our very eyes over and over.
I can't really take my eyes off the TV.
And I also couldn't stand to watch TV one more minute.
Attack on America, attack on America, America under attack, whatever the networks call it.
It's addicting. I think it's addicting partly because we don't want to miss something.
Even if that something makes us sad.
I cry a lot when I hear the stories and see all the people.
If anybody see my daughter.
I think people feel guilty if they're not watching it. You know, that they feel in some way that they're betraying those that have really suffered.
Do you feel like you're participating because you're watching? That's an illusion.
What's not an illusion is the way the coverage tends to unite viewers in a shared experience, even if what's shared is sorrow. It's easy to OD on crisis TV.
I don't want to watch it all the time, just because it kind of deadens the mind.
So how much is too much? We asked Dr. Jimmy Holland, head of the Department of Psychiatry at Sloan Kettering.
Everybody should ask themselves, is this making me feel better or feel worse? And if it's making you feel worse, you probably should limit it. I'm going to watch an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon.
And turn it off.
When you get a feeling of being unable to think about anything else.
You know what I felt when I saw the smoke coming around the buildings? I thought, this is a movie.
But these are no special effects.
That's the image. That's the image that's going to be burned into our brains for the rest of our lives.
Burned into our brains from every angle.
Then there's this guy standing there, and then all of a sudden it just rips right through it. Absolutely powerful.
But I could look at that image a million times, and I still find it mesmerizing.
I know. It's an intimacy with disaster.
Oh my God. Disaster seen from the safe side of the screen. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
And those images going through a lot of people's minds today. We're going to actually leave you this hour with some of the images from today's memorial service at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C.
Better images of the many services on this day of prayer and remembrance in the United States and around the world.
Those of us who are gathered here, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Sikh, Buddhist, Hindu, all people of faith, want to say to this nation and to the world that love is stronger than hate, and that love lived out in justice will in the end prevail.
Today we gather to be reassured that God hears the lamenting and bitter weeping of Mother America, because so many of her children are no more.
With broken and humble hearts, and with tears in our eyes, we turn to you, our Lord, to give us comfort. Help us in our distress. Keep us together as people of diverse faiths, colors, and races. Keep our country strong for the sake of the good and righteousness.
My prayer today is that we will feel the loving arms of God wrapped around us, and will know in our hearts that He will never forsake us as we trust in Him.
On this National Day of Prayer,